One of the best ways to learn how to become a CEO is to become a CEO. Oftentimes when I'm working with people, they'll say to me, hey Steve, is there a book I can read or some course you recommend, some master class or some experiential activity that will teach me how to be a CEO? And I'll say to them, yeah, the best way to become a CEO is just to become a CEO, which is not super helpful and it causes us to make a lot of mistakes in our roles as CEOs and leaders of businesses. So over my career, I've turned around million and billion-dollar companies. So I've worked with a lot of CEOs and I know what works and what doesn't work. So I've synthesized all these learnings into 5 key responsibilities of an effective CEO, and that's what I want to get into right now. Number 1, the first responsibility of a CEO is to build a unified team. And I'll add to that, in fact, it's to build a unified and a high-performing team. So a couple of years ago, I was turning around a very large organization. And this organization had multiple subsidiaries. And those subsidiaries had other subsidiaries. And there's divisions, and there's a lot going on. A lot of functional leaders, a lot of business unit leaders. And there were separate teams in the organization. So people weren't playing together nicely. In other words, there wasn't a lot of collaboration. And this impacted their bottom line. They were in the red. They were losing money for the first time in a long time. And it was my responsibility to go in there and to turn the business around. So one of the first things I did as the leader of the business was put in place a one-team mindset. And that's what I'm referring to when I say unified team. Because yes, in a matrix organization where you have functional leaders and business unit leaders, it's easy to get really siloed. But silos, sometimes they can be good, but oftentimes they lead to competition instead of cooperation and a lot of other bad behavior. So a CEO is responsible for building the team. And also, like I said, part of building this team is to drive high performance within this team. Now that starts with unifying the team on a shared purpose, which I'm going to get into here in just a minute. But building a team is not the responsibility of the HR leader, all right? So you can't just go to human resources and say, look, it's your responsibility to build the team. The CEO has to take this lead. Now, it doesn't mean they have to sit in every single interview and interview frontline workers and be a part of the hiring and firing process. And it doesn't mean that a CEO can't outsource certain responsibilities to the HR leader. But when I say build a team, it's up to the CEO to cast that vision, to share that purpose, to get everybody excited, to drive high performance. So that's responsibility number 1. Responsibility number 2 is to set the strategic direction for the team. This includes defining 3 things. Number 1, where is the company going to compete? In other words, what is their market focus and position? Number 2, how is the company going to compete? Think about generic strategies such as differentiation, cost leadership, or focus, and all the activities that the organization is going to perform and the operating model they're going to follow in order to deliver exceptional value to their customers. All right, so this is the responsibility of the CEO to say, hey, this is where we're going to compete, how we're going to compete, and lastly, how we're going to win. In other words, what are the competitive advantages of the company? What are they going to build? And how are they going to differentiate themselves in the market to deliver these exceptional experiences? So customers keep coming back and they can make customers more valuable, they can lower cost, and they can grow the organization. So setting the strategic direction is really important, and following a proper blueprint is really critical. If you haven't listened to the other episodes on my podcast, Business Strategy, or on the YouTube channel about this, go ahead and check those out because I walk you through how to build a strategy blueprint step by step. You can also find this at Coltivar.com. If you want to go to the website, I have a free course. You don't have to sign up for anything. You can just go to the website and start learning. All right, so that's really important, is to set the strategic direction of the business. Number 3, once the strategic direction is set for the business, it's the CEO's responsibility to communicate consistently over and over again what the strategy is and what the initiatives are in the business. Now, this may sound very redundant, right? But I could tell you in my leadership roles, especially when I'm working with organizations across multiple locations, I'll literally have an all hands on deck company-wide meeting and I'll lay out, okay, this is our strategy. These are the 3 initiatives we're going to pursue. And then weeks later, I'll fly to a certain location and I'll ask somebody there, hey, what are the initiatives that we're pursuing? And they have no idea. And I'm like, okay, there's a giant disconnect. So it's the responsibility of a CEO to constantly repeat over and over again, what is the focus of the business? What's the purpose of the business? Where are they competing? How are they competing? How are they going to win? Communicating these types of strategic elements will ensure that there's clarity, alignment, and accountability across the organization. Number 4, once a unified team is being built, the strategic direction is set, and communication is occurring consistently, it's time to move on to managing your subordinates. So as a CEO, you're gonna have people report up to you, and it's your responsibility to manage those subordinates. Now, here's where some CEOs go wrong. They believe that getting into the details, getting into the weeds with their employees is a form of micromanagement. So CEOs will often say to me, hey Steve, I don't like to micromanage. Or their subordinates will say, I don't like to be micromanaged. Whatever the case may be, there's a lack of accountability. Either the CEO doesn't want to hold people accountable because it's uncomfortable, or the leader doesn't want to be held accountable by the CEO. Whatever it may be, that's a problem. There has to be accountability. So there's nothing wrong with getting into the weeds and understanding what exactly your subordinates are working on. Now, when I go to meetings, sometimes the CEO will use the meeting and they'll hijack the meeting to get caught up to speed on everything that their subordinates are doing when it's supposed to be used for a different purpose. For example, I hold these financial strategy review meetings with my clients in the companies that I'm working with and that I'm building. And during that meeting, we are supposed to be going over the strategy, looking at the initiatives of the organization and determining whether those initiatives are still on track. And then we are also tasked with looking at the financial performance of the company by reviewing the financial statements and then comparing that to KPIs and the forecast into the future. Now, I've had CEOs in these meetings ask so many questions that they should be asking outside of the meeting. So if you're doing this, I invite you to change things up. So instead, ensuring that you're checking in on a regular basis with your subordinates and you're understanding what they're working on a day-to-day basis is really critical. Like I said, not to micromanage them, but instead to keep them focused. I had a CEO once that I was working under, and he was exceptionally good with pushing all the blocks back in. So if you imagine a Jenga tower, if you haven't played Jenga, it's a bunch of blocks that you stack up into this tower. And the point of the game is to remove these blocks without the tower falling over. Inevitably with the company, these metaphorical blocks get pushed out and they're coming all out of different functions and parts of the business. So a CEO's responsibility is to push those blocks back in. For example, if I had my chief operating officer report to me, in those meetings, I would say, okay, what are you working on? And if he or she said, I'm doing A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, then it would be my job as a CEO to say, look, let's eliminate F and C and B, and let's just stay focused on A. And by eliminating things and helping them to push the blocks back in and staying in their lane and focused on getting things done is really, really important. My colleagues probably get annoyed with me because I often say, put the E on it. You know, you have D-O-N-E for done, which spells done. And I'll say, put the E on it because it's so easy to have so many plates spinning in business and a lot of tasks are D-O-N. It's like, okay, we need to put the E on it and be done, all right? So that's an important role of a CEO, to manage their subordinates. And then this is the next important part, to ensure that those subordinates are managing their subordinates. So not only do you have to manage your subordinates, but you have to make sure your subordinates are managing their subordinates. So that's really critical. And number 5, this may be the hardest thing of all, but it's to have difficult and uncomfortable conversations with people throughout the organization. That's the CEO's role. That's what we're tasked with, right? That's a lot of responsibility. But we have to have those uncomfortable conversations. See, I'll say to people, it's disrespectful to not have the conversation, because if I don't have the conversation, guess what? Resentment's just going to build. I'm going to treat you differently, or I'm going to say things over here or there instead of just addressing the issue head on. So if you want to be respectful of people, have those difficult and uncomfortable conversations. And I can tell you, as you do that, people are going to have more respect for you because they're going to trust you, right? There's going to be more transparency in the organization. Now, obviously, there's a good way to do it and there's a bad way to do it. I'm still learning this practice because oftentimes I'm direct. I can just be like, boom, a straight shooter, and it can hurt people's feelings or it can come across wrong. But don't be afraid to have those difficult conversations because it'll just make the organization better. All right, those are my 5 best tips for CEOs who want to be more effective in their role. Thanks for joining me today, and until next episode, take care of yourself. Cheers.